Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Launchpad's Pick and Mix podcast. And I am over the moon that a very old and friend of mine, I know old in the right sense, hopefully. I don't actually know how old you are, Mark, to be honest, but don't disclose.
Wee bit older than you, Chris.
A wee bit older than me, all right. But yeah, a very old friend of mine we've been friends, education friends for maybe 20 odd years. And it's the great Mark Anderson. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it was lovely to have a little bit of a catch up on the weekend. We did a little bit of a swapsy, didn't we?
Yeah, with the books, yeah.
I gave you a copy of my book, my latest book that I co-authored with Ollie Lewis. He's a head teacher at the Amity International School in Abu Dhabi, although he's he's actually from Weymouth. So it sounds exotic, but he's from Weymouth.
We'll have to get in
and you gave me a copy of this. And I've got to say, even though it's upside down, I've got to say, Chris, and I'm not, it's your podcast, and obviously, you use it as a vehicle to promote the book and your work and things, but I absolutely love it. One of the things you've asked, and you ask all of your guests to do, is to pick some launchpads from inside the book. It was so hard because they're really good. And what I love is that in each of them, it didn't just sort of give you answers, does it? It sort of nudges you and prompts you and gets you thinking about stuff. And there's so much good stuff in here. So
cheers, bud.
Yeah, thank you for the copy. It's really good. It's really, really good.
Well, one of the things that I'm kind of getting into now, which has become a bit of a funny thing, rather than getting the guests to introduce themselves, I've been Googling them and then reading out to them what Google think they do. Okay, so here we go. This is what Google says about Mark Anderson. You ready for this? So, Mark Anderson is a prominent international educational speaker, consultant, and author, widely known by his professional moniker, the ICT Evangelist. As of 2026, he continues to be a leading voice in educational technology, specializing in digital strategy, pedagogy-focused technology integration, and the effective use of AI in education. So far, so good?
Not sounding too bad. It's almost like I wrote it myself.
Your hype man. Currently, the head of education at NetSupport, a global leader in classroom management and online safety software, his own independent consultancy. What else it says? It says key books and resources, the EdTech Playbook. Show us the T-shirt. EdTech Playbook 25-26. The Perfect ICT Every Lesson. And it says his award-winning blog, the ICT Evangelist, a central hub for free resources. There we go. What else does it say? Recognition. A fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching. He has been recognized as one of the most influential people in EdTech in Europe. Check you out. Apple Distinguished Educator, Google Certified Innovator, and a Microsoft Certified Educator. Amazing. There we go.
That's not too bad, is it, Chris? I need to get some more badges.
Tell me a bit about what like a typical week looks like for you then.
Oh, well, there is no such thing as a typical week. I mean, that's the one nice thing. Just like, went back when I was teaching, just like no two classes are the same, no two children are the same, it's all sorts. My work at NetSupport sees me doing really interesting things around supporting the team around product development. It's about focusing, one of the things we'll talk about later with technology, just because you can do something with it doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And so if you are going to choose to use it, you want the young people to be using it well. And so we have classroom management software, which has got safeguarding things sort of built into it as well. So one of my things I do pretty regularly is look at the keywords the software tracks under the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance and other bits from the DFE. We have to track and monitor what children are doing on their devices for safeguarding reasons. And so I engage with the likes of the Counter-Terrorism Unit, the Internet Watch Foundation, who remove sort of child sexual abuse material from the internet in a really not very nice but really interesting engagements there, making sure our keywords and safeguarding features are current, up to date, relevant, and doing what they should be. Balancing that, I might be speaking at events, so just thinking locally. on 10th of Feb, I'm running the South Gloss AI in Education event for head teachers. Whereas if you jump forward into March, I'm over in Barcelona speaking at the National Association of British Schools in Spain conference.
Oh, cool.
Through to working with, I've got a lot of trust clients, and I support them with digital strategy, looking at, again, really interesting projects, implementation, making sure things work. So like last week I was up in Worcester with the Black Pear Trust, and we've got a Chromebook project working there with Year 5, looking to see how we can use those tools plus a few AI things in there, like a brilliant it's a really, really good, I'm not on commission, so I can say this, a really lovely maths tool called Magma Maths,
Right.
which has got loads of really good practice-based and AI-supported sort of personalised pathways within it, which is running on
Right.
those
Wow.
Chromebooks and things as well. Through to, one of the things I wanted to share with you was about this report earlier. This is the outcome of some work I've done with the Woodland Academy Trust in Bexley. And in here, we did a whole year's worth of research into what works with AI in the classroom for teachers, not with all teachers, but there's some fantastic things in here. Some of the statistics are brilliant. So I can share the links. You can download this.
Yeah, we'd love that. Yeah.
For afterwards. But the approaches are bringing things like 56% improvement in productivity, 100% improvement in student engagement in lessons, all sorts of really, really useful things. But it was all looking at how we can improve teacher workload, a bit of work-life balance, improve engagement, support adaptations, creating resources, that sort of thing. Amazing. And importantly, student outcomes. So I do all. No 2 days, let alone 2 weeks are the same, Chris.
Well, let's travel back in time a bit then. So, where did it all start, and of course, where we met? Tell us a bit about teaching, all that sort of stuff.
So So I first started teaching in East Anglia in Peterborough, and I started teaching when the sort of national strategies first came out. One of those strategies was around information communication technology, as it was renamed and rebranded. And I got the job. I'm a business and economics teacher, secondary by qualification. And the head teacher said, so as someone who can teach business, does that mean you can use a spreadsheet and use a word processor? I thought, well, obviously, can't you? Sort of thing. He said, well, I can, but I'm the head teacher. So he gave me 50% business and economics in post 16, and then a whole load of sort of year 7, 8 and 9 to key stage 3 IT straight off the bat. And then within sort of two years, I was pretty much only teaching the IT. And then jump forward a bit. So I was now a head of department, and Michael Gove came along and shunted things around. And so I then became a computing teacher and having to upskill myself teaching A-level computing and all that sort of stuff. And 10 years in, moved to the Southwest, back from East Anglia. I'm a Gloucester boy originally. And so I then worked for the next sort of 10 years at Clevedon School, which is where you sort of first came to know me and my work and all that sort of stuff. And inspired by a few people like Andy Hutt, Tim Rylands, Russell Prue, a few others, I started sort of sharing the things that were going on in my classroom, the good stuff and the not so good stuff, on my blog. And then being invited, I was friends with somebody, and she said, we're organising this thing called a Teach Meet in North Bristol. And I went along, and I had no problem ever delivering an assembly, delivering, lessons in the class, that sort of thing. I mean, when I was 18, 19 doing a BEd, I was nervous, but that far into my career, I was fine. But and this is where I first met you, wasn't it? Yeah. And so we were at this Teach Meet, and there were probably about 10 of us there, weren't there, right?
It was.
And I shared about a project I'd started with my student digital leaders in the school. And I swear to goodness, I mean, you'll probably say it was brilliant or something, Chris, but I was absolutely bricking it. Yeah. I was nervous. I felt like I was stammering. I was sweating. I was like, oh my days, I can't do this. If I've ever got to deliver training and supporting staff and what have you myself, which I hadn't really done much of at that point in time. I need to get better at this. So rather than just like run away from it, I started organising my own teach meets at Clevedon, which just went absolutely crazy. We were talking about launch pads before, for example. Tom Sherrington's first ever sort of speaking gig was at my teach meet in Clevedon.
I love it.
And we had all sorts of people there, from Harold Robert to Vic Goddard to all sorts of people, Alex Quigley, these amazing people who are doing such a brilliant thing with education right now, coming over and just speaking at my little teach meet in Cleveland, But the first sort of one or two we did, we had 15, 20, 30 people come up. But by the sort of fifth or sixth one, we were talking about it on the weekend, weren't we?
Yeah.
They were huge affairs. It was brilliant. I was working with Jim Smith, the author of the Lazy Teacher's Handbook. He was on SLT there as well at the same time. And we came up with these crazy ideas. You were talking about the gold sequin jacket I used to wear and things.
I remember that.
And the silly top hats. But it became a whole school thing. The art team,
well, the kids were involved,
with the students. Massively. The students would develop the sort of backdrops on the stage and make it like that. We had DT making things.
They did the food as well. The kids did the food one time.
Yeah, that was that. That's sort of the last 3 times, which tied in again to their food tech coursework. Yeah. It became a really, really, really big thing, and so that, and I led on the iPad one-to-one project on the teaching and learning side of it at the school, where we launched iPads back in 2012, and a whole bunch of things led to me writing a few books and blog doing well, and all these different things led me to a position when my kids were young where I thought I might take a year or two out just to try and get a bit of balance, because I was never seeing them while they were young, and so I stopped teaching in 2015, started my own consultancy, supporting schools with digital strategy, implementation, change management, all that sort of thing. And it's 2026.
Yeah, never look back.
I haven't gone back, but it is a profession that you take a chance when you go off and do these things. But I thought, well, I never planned to stay out of teaching as long as I have done anyway. But if the idea didn't work, then I had enough money in the coffers to cover me if I didn't get any work. I did sign up to every teacher agency in Bristol.
Of course,
the sort of day I had my notice in. Do you know what I mean? But I've not had to do it. It's just been cracking on ever since. And
well, that is great.
I'm very, very lucky and fortunate.
Well, yeah, and absolutely that. Well, we're going to learn more about all this stuff as we go through. And so let's get cracking, shall we? For those that are new to the podcast, it's built up of a series of different kind of elements, which are consistent, and that the guests get to kind of select to kind of tell us a bit more about them as a person, rather than maybe some of the more kind of, high profile things we might know them for. And so the first thing we'll do is kind of do a fast friends question, which is, so the researchers who created this list of 36 questions, their goal was to try and be able to create connection between people as quickly as possible. And so Mark's chosen 2 of these, which we'll go through. The first one being, what is your most treasured memory? So tell us about that.
Well, it's funny, and I've got lots of great memories. When my children were born, and them achieving things and those sorts of things. But I'm definitely kind of like a pleaser. I want to do a good job. I want to make a difference. I got into teaching to help people and make a difference, and I still have that sort of as a core sort of value that runs through me. And so when I was looking through the various questions, I thought it'd be really fitting. My dad passed away 16 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
And I shared earlier, I'm a Gloucester boy, but I was living in a place called Burnham-on-Sea. Nobody knows Burnham, but everyone knows Weston-super-Mare.
Okay.
Right, so go down sort of from Gloucester down the M5, and you'll know, being local, between sort of Portishead, Gordano Services, and Clevedon, the motorway sort of goes like a sort of split level, and across to the right, as you're heading south, across to the right hand side, you can see there's an area called the Swiss Valley, and there's brilliant views across to the right and what have you. But as you come towards the end, where the motorway starts to then come back together to be 3 lanes next to each other, as you look across to the right, so you can see Clevedon School, where I used to teach and was there and what have you. And I've always wanted to do the right thing by my parents and what have you. But when my dad was in hospital, and we knew he wasn't going to be with us much longer and what have you, he said and he was somebody who hated driving, right? So it was nice that
Right.
he had this sort of memory to share with me. He said, every time we used to come down and see you down in Burnham, I was always just so proud of you. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'd look right and I'd see that huge school that you work in, and I get to hear of all the things you're doing there and the impact you're having and the results your kids are getting and all the rest of it. And so he's so proud of you, And so with him not being around anymore, I was thinking sort of treasured memory. And I loved working at Cleveland. It was a really good time. We had some amazing people there, from like Zoe Elder, we talked about, Jim Smith, David Dido was there as well. I mean, it was just a real hotbed of amazing people. And so that's my treasured memory, really. I love my time at the school, and it was just it's such a nice thing to know that your dad was proud of you, that he thought you'd done well in this world, all that sort of thing. Some of the lasting sort of things he shared with me, So
that's really nice, isn't it? And do you ever go down that way now, and do you recreate what he must have done, where you look right and you see the school?
All the time. So I live in Bristol now, but my children live down in Burnham still. So I'm up and down the M5 doing that all the time. and literally, like, every time, as long as the fog hasn't rolled in off the 7 or something, I look right and I think about my dad. And it's interesting, funny, because just beyond that, the view then right in front of you shows you right across the sort of the Weston-super-Mare Bay and all of that.
Wow.
And you can see right across the Somerset levels. It's an amazing view. So, I mean, I'm concentrating on the road at the same time. Obviously, I'm not driving.
Of course,
one of these.
We don't want to get.
I'm not in a Waymo yet. Getting my driverless car taxi taking me places.
Oh, of course, that's coming, isn't it? Yeah.
But yeah.
All right then. Well, let's move on to the next bit. So, for those that are new to the podcast, another element is what we call an ignition point. So we ask the guests to think back into their lives about either events or people or experiences that have changed them kind of dramatically in some way or acted as ignition points. And so the first one that you've written down says Boys Brigade. So tell us a bit about why that changed you.
Well, it's funny in a variety of ways. It was really instrumental in so many ways, because I think the sort of moral compass I've got sort of came from being involved in the Boys Brigade. I remember we'd moved house and I was about sort of 5 or 6, and somebody who was in my class, Stephen Mitten, who actually then came through with me into secondary school and what have you, he said, you should come on to Boys Brigade, Mark. And I was like, what's that then? And so Boys Brigade is a bit like Scouts, but you go to church, right, as well.
Okay.
And so, the getting involved with and attending church. I mean, I was that person who would win like the Bible badges and Bible quiz badges and Sunday school attendance awards and all this sort of stuff and whatnot. But as I sort of went through the ranks and got older within the Boys Brigade, so you have like, your juniors and your seniors and what have you. And as I was sort of 14, 15, the badge classes, I used to sort of be someone who would receive training in different things like knot tying or campcraft or whatever it was, orienteering, X, Y, and Z. I ended up having the role of actually training and running sessions with the younger juniors and other bits,
right.
And it tied in with my DV and things I was doing as well and what have you.
Yeah.
But I loved it. That moment when someone just gets it,
Yeah.
They can sort of tie the sheep shank or whatever it is they're doing. I absolutely loved it. And it was at that point I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And so, when it came to UCAS and applying for university, all the rest of it, it wasn't, subject specific stuff. I was, writing on a BEd. I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. I didn't want to do the PGCE route or anything like that. I wanted to focus on what it was to be a teacher. So that was a really important thing for me. And so much stuff that I learned at that time still runs through me, and those sort of those values still sort of sit within inside me as well.
Yeah, I love that. Crazy that you can almost locate the exact moment that you decided to then, take on a career and, all the things that came from that. I was just thinking about how, well, not only should the government, I guess, invest more in that, because that's, the sooner we can get people to feel the power of, transferring knowledge or helping someone develop a skill, that might be an interesting recruitment strategy. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Well, the
Thanks,
third
Chris.
kind of, that's right, mate. Yeah, the third element, of course, is that we ask guests to, as Mark suggested, pick 2 launch pads from the Launchpad books, which resonate the most with them. And so I'm just going to share my screen for those that are watching, on video. But the first one that Mark's chosen is titled "Doing Nothing Should Always Be an Option." So I'll explain what I was thinking when I kind of made it, and then we'll ask Mark why it resonates. And for me, again, a lot of these launch pads are kind of fairly, I don't know, personal, in that they either come from something that I'm learning or they come from a personal reflection. And I have, unfortunately, fallen into the trap of kind of linking, I don't know, productivity with usefulness and happiness. You know, I mean, I'm obsessed with doing, making, constantly thinking that action is a kind of proxy for sort of success. So this was an interesting reflection for me. And if you're watching this on the video, you'll see this, but if not, the tagline says, new is not always better. And so patience and distance may very well be the leader's best strategy. And so I tripped over some, obviously, as I normally do, went into the theory and tripped over a couple of phrases that resonated. This first one being called strategic inaction. And of course, the name suggesting that you're deciding purposefully not to do something. But also, it then started talking about something which they called the strategic pause, but I changed that, the power of the pause. And so we'll delve a little bit more into those. We go back to strategic inaction, this idea that it's the disciplined, reasoned choice to kind of consciously refrain from action. And how that breaks down, I guess, the first one being opportunity. So, the fact that leaders should refrain from chasing the new shiny object or the better employee or the new kind of strategic path. But also this idea of interventions. Leaders should also resist constant action and almost interference, feeling like they always have to be front and center, always have to be involved. And instead of that, allowing kind of others to emerge and to grow. So that was the sort of more strategic one that you can plan for. But it flipped in the theory and it started talking about how, we have to think about this in the moment as well, and that idea of the power of a pause. So the kind of cognitive discipline of creating a brief, intentional delay between a stimulus and a response, having the power to just kind of, take that pause. And so it broke again down in the theory, this idea of planning that, we should kind of purposefully pause before action so that we can then collaboratively explore and prepare. So there's almost this kind of resisting that knee-jerk response to then say, let's just take a pause, let's go wider, and then we'll come back and then make a decision. And then the last one that came up, which I've over the years become kind of a massive fan of, this idea of putting space between a stimulus and response, kind of interrupting what, Daniel Kahneman, in his kind of Thinking Fast and Slow book, makes that distinction between kind of system 1 thinking, which is very emotional and kind of reactive, to kind of system 2, which is a bit more sort of, responsive and a bit more objective. And that leaders, really should be proactively managing themselves so that they can put space between those two things. Because typically when we do that, we make better decisions. But that was what I was thinking when I made it. Why did it resonate with you, Mark?
For a few reasons, really. But whilst you were sort of talking through what you shared there, then, Chris, I'm reminded of a job interview I went for.
Oh, yeah.
Once, actually, right? And it was a SLT job, and I scored the highest, which I was very pleased about, and what have you, in this particular round. And it was one of the first things we did, and it was part of the SIFT. So there were like 12 of us, which then went down to the sort of last 3 pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it was where we were all sort of sat around a table and we were discussing some stuff and what have you. And I just sat and listened.
Right.
When you've got loads of different points of view being hurled around a room, and I've been seeing this sort of stuff in the Traitors recently, actually, with no spoilers, but with some things happening with Harriet. And that ability to sort of sit and listen, take on board everyone's perspectives, it's really important, that intentional bit you've got in there, that ability to just sit there, take it all on board, and have the moment to, it says pause in there, but that you need time to synthesize all of that information so that you can take that considered view to add in what you want at the end. And that's what it was Leslie Greenway, former head teacher from Bridgewater, deputy head at Gordano School for years. It's what she loved about what I did in that bit there. But the reason why it resonated with me, Chris, was because I love technology. We were sharing some things like what's on my desk, and it's like Geek Central, the Lego, the Funko Pops, the flipping Pokemon EVs, all sorts of things, right? But technology, whilst it's amazing, it isn't always the answer. And so cognizance is so important. And trying to draw parallels, but as teachers, we'll know lots of analog things we can do, whether we're going to do, cold calling, pose, pause, pounce, bounce, think, pair, share, whatever it is, right? In the moment, we'll think carefully about what it is we want to choose to use. And technology needs that same deep thinking. Right. Because just because we can do something with technology doesn't necessarily mean that we should. Lots and lots of technology has the propensity to be really gimmicky, right? But if it isn't serving one of what I sort of call my three sort of North Stars of, does it help with your teaching? Does it help with your learning? Or does it help reduce your workload? If it isn't ticking at least one of those three things, if not more, then, should you be using it at all? And if it is a gimmick, and there's loads of things like, a lot of the sort of virtual reality stuff, and particularly with some of the AI things with all the videos and songs and all this sort of stuff that you can create, and the brilliant, it's amazing that you can do it. But should you be using it? Is it having an impact on, let's say, teaching, learning, or reducing your workload? And so doing nothing should always be an option. One of the key sort of frameworks I've always shared is one by Kohler and Mishra, which is TPACK, which builds on Schulman's PCK. Pedagogical content knowledge model, and TPACK is it's a mouthful of mine, but technological pedagogical content knowledge framework. Oh, right. And so you've got your three domains of technological knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and content knowledge. And then Schulman obviously said, pedagogy and content come together, that could be good teaching and learning. And they said, well, that's great, but where does technology fit into that mix? And that center of that three-way Venn isn't about, right, cool, we know exactly how to use technology all the time. What they say is about making sure you've got cognizant use so that you know when to or not to use technology, because sometimes not using it is the best option. Yeah. And so that's a launch pad for me was really good. It really resonated, Chris, because I think it's really important that we know when to or not to. Yeah. And I know you want to get an ROI on technology is very expensive. But just using technology in and of itself doesn't mean that it's going to help in those sort of three areas. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot now. We haven't discussed this. It's just popped into my mind. So ready? Isn't there some sort of framework, which is it SAM, substitute?
SAMR. Yeah.
What's that? What is that?
So that was a framework postulated by Dr. Ruben Puente-Jura with no research behind it whatsoever. Oh, really? But the idea behind it, it's a two-level thing, and there's substitution and augmentation at the bottom level, okay, and then there's modification and redefinition at the top level. Okay, and it postulates the idea that technology, and I share SAMR alongside TPACK all the time because it's a really good thinking model. Right. Okay, but we shouldn't be sort of seduced by it, to use another traitor phrase. We shouldn't be seduced by it thinking that it's a ladder, because actually for some children, particularly where accessibility is important, right, sometimes technology, right, is essential for some people, right, the screen readers or other things, adaptation in technology that you can use to make it so they can access the curriculum and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And so substitution isn't necessarily a bad thing. But at the bottom level, you've got substitution and augmentation. At the top, you've got modification and redefinition. And the idea is that you can use technology to do things that wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the technology. Okay. And it's good to sort of get you thinking about how you can stretch and challenge what you're doing with the tech in a widely a common example I share is about the difference between note taking and then using something like OneNote.
Okay.
So if I was in a class, I had a tablet with a stylus and I was just writing my notes, right, into OneNote, well, that's the same as just writing it in my book. There's no extra learning, there's nothing
is
extra
that
happening at all.
substitution?
That's substitution.
Right.
Augmentation is when I make my notes and then I get my iPad or whatever I've got and I take a picture of my teacher's resources on the screen as well. So I'm augmenting what I'm doing already. Now, if I go up a level again, modifying, well, you're my sort of elbow partner, so I'm actually collaborating and working with you at the same time on this, Chris. So my notes automatically become better, and I'm working on the same time as you, with all that sort of stuff, right? And you can't really do that with your books,
Yeah.
And you can do it remotely, all the rest of it. Then what you might do as well then is put that online. You might get some feedback from a peer. You might drop a line to Tim Peake if it's a science class and say, "Hi, Tim," and he might respond and put stuff on there.
Wow,
which again can really bring sort of learning alive for young people with people like that and whatnot. And so that's what SAMR is. It helps you think about that technological knowledge. There are lots of other things as well. I dive into it in more detail in the book if you want.
Let's
read more about all of that.
Yeah.
But,
brilliant. Well, cheers for that. I mean, that's some additional learning for people, and again, I guess a launchpad. People can go and get the book and then dig into that. Well, let's keep going then. So we're going to move on to your second ignition point. So again, something that's kind of changed you, and I'm fascinated by this one. It says, "Teach me versus DJing."
It wasn't a versus thing really per se, but when I went to uni, the student union was playing like Nine Inch Nails every night, and it just really wasn't my bag. So I went to the entertainments officer and I said, "Look, mate, could you just organise something different?" He said, "Well, yeah, but why don't you do it yourself?" I was like, "All right, then." So I got on the train, went home, got all my old Now albums and a few Prodigy things. Anything on vinyl I had, I picked up and brought it back up on the train. It weighed a ton. I couldn't mix, couldn't do anything, but people seemed to enjoy my nights. It went from Come On Eileen to House of Pain Jump Around to all sorts. And so I was to get invited to go to house parties, and I met people who actually could DJ properly, and I was hooked. And I love my dance music, electronic music, and what have you. And so I bought myself some Technics, learned how to mix, and all of that. When I first started teaching, and I had residencies at the student union there, I used to go up to Manchester and play at student nights, but again, doing that sort of thing up in Manchester and house parties and all that sort of stuff. But when I went to Peterborough, first started teaching, I moved there. I didn't know anybody, and I was walking around town, and this club had a DJ knockout competition thing on the door of this club. I thought, oh, that's a good way to sort of make some friends and meet some new people. So I entered this DJ competition, and the prize was like a bit of cash, 2 pairs of Technics, and a residency in the club. Right. And so I entered this DJ competition and I won it. And it was really funny. So I was teaching my first ever lesson as a sort of NQT, as it was back then. And I was looking around at my year 12 class, and I'm like, I recognise these kids. I'm like, where do I know them from? And they're looking at me like I know them from somewhere. And you could guess where they were, right?
Of course it was, yeah.
So I'll try and be a sort of succinct, but I entered. It led me to getting going down to London and doing stuff in London, because it was quick on the East Coast main line from Peterborough down to King's Cross. So I was going down to London, going to nights out with my new friends who were DJing down in London and stuff. And so I entered a competition in Soho, and I won that one as well. So that then started getting me gigs in and around London. And then Defected Records, who are like the biggest house sort of label, they had a mixed competition. So I thought, do you know what, I'll enter this one as well. And I won that as well. And that then sort of got me playing at events all over the place. I had residencies all over the UK and abroad, And so I was teaching Monday, Friday, and on weekends I was down at Stansted Airport or getting in the car and driving to Edinburgh or Leeds. I had residencies in Edinburgh, Leeds, and all this sort of stuff. And so I used to do that on weekends, lots in my 20s and early 30s. And it got to a point in time where, because I was still doing everything I need to do in my job. I was still doing my Monday, Friday, doing marking, feedback, all the rest of it. But I had to make a decision about whether I wanted to sort of progress in my career as a teacher or, push things on the production and DJing side, which I
Yeah,
still
yeah,
do
yeah.
I still do for fun these days. But I moved to sit down this way, and I managed to get in with a local outfit who run nights in and around Bristol and Cardiff. And I've been doing it for a little while, and I was doing a night in town, Bolly Arnolfini here in Bristol, and I've been starting to organise a teach meets, and things were getting busy, what with work and things. I was head of department. I was doing so much more in my day to day with teaching, and it's really, really busy. And as is always the case in clubs, people come up and talk to you in the DJ booth, and it was a really good night. We had shapeshifters. It was like I was one of the residents, but it was like Joey Negro, then me, then the shapeshifters, all this sort of stuff. It was absolutely brilliant. My birthday weekend, all the rest of it. And these sort of 24, 25-year-olds sort of loitering around the side of the DJ booth, and in between putting some tracks on, I went up to speak to them, didn't recognise them, and like, "Hey, you're right, sir." Right? They were old students of mine from Clevedon. I've been teaching at A level when I first sort of started teaching there. Jumped forward sort of 5 years, and they're now out and on a night out around Bristol. And I was like, "Do you know what? I'm getting too old for this."
Yeah.
Right. And I thought, I'm going to cut it off, and I can still do it for fun. And what have you. So I contacted my various residencies, jacked it in, and focused even more on my career then. And that was that sort of trigger point for me then.
Yeah.
And I was already middle leadership by this point as well. But, it gave me so much more time to dedicate to my career and doing all the extra things. I was already doing a lot extra anyway, but it gave me that real opportunity to do even more,
Yeah, that's tricky, that, isn't it? I was just because part of me wants to talk about this idea that, if you want to progress or if you want to be great at anything, you have to dedicate yourself and you have to give a significant amount of resource towards it. But then I was instantly kind of challenging my own self then about how important it is to hold on to a bit of yourself that's not kind of career driven, isn't it? Like, it's very easy in teaching to get completely sucked in. And I know we talk to trainees quite a lot, don't we, about don't give up on all your hobbies and all these things. You need a bit of a balancer, and I suppose that stands true for leadership as well. About,
I think the trick is, right. So you all know who I'm going to talk about now, Jeff Barton, right? Jeff Barton DJs, right? He's got if you go to mixcloud.com, I think it's like DJ Jeffy B or something, right? and you wouldn't say that he's been held back in his career at all, and he still does it as a bit of fun. All the rest of it, so he's his ASCO leadership, his headship, his English book, his writing, his book's amazing. If you haven't read Jeff Barton's book, he's still heavily involved in Oracy, and that all sort of fed into the curriculum assessment review as well. I think it is important to have hobbies, things that you do outside of your work. But people often say to me, I'm really lucky to do what I do. And you'll know that Magic Johnson thing, the more you practice, the luckier you get, right? And so I think, focusing myself like I did in my sort of mid-30s to dedicate myself even more completely to what it is that I do and what I am really, really good at. And is my sort of mission, calling, whatever you want to call it. I still love the mixing. Like I say, my own son's initials are DJ, literally. And he loves it. He got a turntable for Christmas, but he's got a little DJ controller. He's got his own Mixcloud account. He does his mixes. We've done gigs together, sort of Christmas discos and what have you. And I think it's good to have extra strings to your bow, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that I was, doing one very professional thing and another sort of semi-professional, Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that is fascinating. And again, it's the whole point of this podcast, really, because I thought I knew you. I had no idea that you were, an internationally famous kind of DJ. Well, let's move on then. So the second launchpad that Mark chose, again, I'll just get this slide up, is called Get on the Bus. And I mean, this has been used by lots of people over the years, and I think I must have heard it probably 10 years ago, and then it just popped back into my mind when I was making this version of the book. But the idea being that kind of a lot of times, if you think about as a leader why a project didn't go very well, you can often track it back to the levels of engagement that either yourself or the people involved showed. And we can't guarantee, I suppose, then, that just because people are involved in a project that they either have the engagement to run with it, or that engagement stays with them the whole way through. And so people will be familiar with this idea of kind of people on a bus. Mostly it's often used to describe getting people in the right place. People talk about either get on the bus, get them in the right seats, and then you have to get people off the bus. But I took it a slightly different way, that this idea that people often stay behind, so they don't even get on the bus when there's a lack of clarity. So when people don't kind of understand the project's goal or their role or the expectations of them, then it's hard for them to fully engage with it. There's often the kind of the quality of the communication has an impact. So kind of miscommunication or a lack of feedback, or actually sort of if you're inadequately sharing information, that hinders the progress. And then the last one is the most obvious one, this lack of motivation. So typically kind of, employees feel uninspired or disengaged or demotivated, then they often don't give all of themselves, or they'll hold back from sort of fully engaging. So then I started thinking, okay, well, what about ownership? So I remember reading in a book, it says something like, make everybody in your team an owner. And what they didn't mean is obviously give them shares in your organization or whatever. It basically meant that as humans, when we feel like we own it, or we have a responsibility or accountability, that drives our motivation. And so giving people some responsibility or some sort of level of accountability can help. And in the last bit, I sort of switched over really to think about, okay, so how do we get people on the bus then? If we recognize that some people might not, or they might be quietly kind of getting off the bus or sitting at the back, how do we get them on the bus? Well, obviously, any consultation, any time that you are collaborating will have a big impact, So if you give people opportunities and the safety to kind of raise suggestions or concerns, you naturally pull them further into kind of the project. Something about contextualization, people are always, well, I say always is a strong word, isn't it? But much more likely to engage in something if it sits with them and fits with kind of the context. And then the last one is collaboration. It's not the last one, collaboration and communication. And so, as we said before, there's got to be some level of contribution from others. It goes back to this, what we're now using is mattering, isn't it? This idea that people want to feel like their involvement in something matters. So that was what I was thinking when I made it. But why did this one resonate with you?
Well, for me, like, I don't know if you've had a chance to look through the book yet, but I mean, in there, in the first chapter, we talk about why technology historically hasn't worked. For those of you who've been in education long enough, you'll remember, the interactive whiteboard installs, and they cost so many thousands of pounds, yet they're just, really just posh overhead projectors or
Sure.
a standard sort of projector. And so it's about involving stakeholders. And a mistake, and something I've learned over the years with my sharing, right? I read a post this morning by Gary Henderson, who's the director of IT at Millfield School, and I was talking about bet fatigue next week.
Right.
From where we're recording today, it's bet at London Excel next week. And I've been talking a lot for a while about AI fatigue. It's just like absolutely crazy how much the pace of change, right? And, teachers have got enough imposter syndrome and fear of missing out without having to learn about all the latest bits and bobs all the time. And in the sort of sharing I was doing the other day, I talked about bet fatigue. There's so much going on with people sort of living their best lives and putting amazing stuff. And if you look at teacher Twitter, as it used to be, right? But any sort of social media where teachers they're always sharing, like, the how brilliant my lesson was, or this brilliant resource I've made, or check me out, I'm the best teacher ever, right? But for me, I actually really love it when someone says, I had a really terrible lesson. Or I found, because then you can share the stuff that hasn't worked so that others can learn from that mistake. Yeah. And that sort of honesty, I think, is really, really useful. And so I want to share something that didn't work, right? And what I learned from that. and how it ties into this. Because we didn't engage when we did the iPad one-to-one at Clevedon. We didn't when I first started doing the actual research into it. We had like a class set, and I was going off and doing stuff, and I didn't engage parents. I didn't engage the community. People got to hear about, well, they're doing this research. There's stuff going on. What's going on? And parents end up having loads of questions. Are my children going to be forced to have an iPad or any of these sort of things, And so this for me is about, yes, engagement, but not just engagement in who you might think are your most important stakeholders, like children or colleagues or office staff or support staff, admin team, central office, whatever it is, but thinking about the whole community engagement piece. Because if you want things to work, and we've seen it from research from Hattie, that triangulation between home, school, and child. If you haven't got that there, you're not going to get the impact you want. If you want collective teacher efficacy, you've got to bring everyone along the bus and be working along and having that shared vision and making all the same impact together, so forth and so on, right? So this really resonated for me because involving people, and I think the key one in here really is that consultation period and working with people, because people are far more likely to come with you on the journey if you've done it with them. You take on board their point of view, you engage them, and once we did engage parents, it was at that point where we were able to move things even faster, better, much better engagement, loads of support. Parents who work in the technology sector are willing to give it their time to come in and support. All sorts of things. The new link governors. People want to get involved. People who've done this sort of thing in the corporate world, who shared things that didn't work for them. It was brilliant, and it wasn't that they were ostracised on purpose or anything. It was just an oversight. And so I think when you're considering engagements, whether it's a new subject, whether it's a new school uniform, you're going to vertical tutoring, whatever the initiative is, ensuring consultation and involving all of your sort of key stakeholders, I think is absolutely paramount. Because if you miss people out, that's going to cause resistance when there doesn't need to be any. Because it's not like I'm organising this thing so that I can get a nice kickback on X, Y, or Z. It's just what you want to do is make things better for your students, better for your teachers, improve outcome. We get into, like you've heard me say so many times today, Chris, we get into the world of education to make a difference. So our motives are good. But unless you're having those open, unless you're leading it and having those frank conversations and taking on board the feedback, then you're going to get resistance. And that's not helping you get anywhere, is it?
I love it, yeah. And of course, that creates an interesting kind of reflection and takeaway for anyone who's listening to this, to kind of have a look at the current projects you've got and, have an honest reflection around, are people on the bus and how much are they on the bus? And then if you've got any upcoming projects that you haven't even started yet, what can you do proactively to make sure that you maximize the amount of people, on the bus? All right. Well, let's finish off then with your final Fast Friends question, which you chose as, what personal quality do you feel you need to develop the most? Tell us about that.
The ability to say no is hard. Okay. I was going to talk about imposter syndrome, because that's just so rife, isn't it? Right. Yeah. But when you want to help people and do and whatnot, if someone comes to you and asks for help, then you really want to do that. But I've found over the years that the people who end up getting the least help are the people who actually matter to you the most, right. And with particularly with my own children, there's been so many times where I've right, when they were really young and things, and I'm sitting there, I'm writing, someone's dropped me a line on my contact form on the website and they want some help or something, I'm busy with, but it's the weekend, I should, so being mindful of, even if it isn't about saying no, it's about just being mindful of, and this is going back to that thing with the DJing versus time with the children, time on the career, and the sort of move to doing consultancy for more time with the children. Just what I've learned is you only have like one life, right? And a bit like my children who want to spend all the money every day, all the money, all the money. You can only spend that money once, and you can only spend that time once.
Yeah,
And
right.
so, if it's going to put an extra pressure and extra stress on you, say no.
Yeah,
Is absolutely fine. And if people aren't fine with that, then that says more about them than it says about you. It's
yeah,
not like none of us will reply and say no and full stop and then send it,
yeah, yeah.
right?
There's
You'll
a
give
way
you
to do it
mitigate.
properly. Yeah,
I think you'll give you mitigating reasons and what have you. Um, you could even choose to draft that letter, email, whatever it is, on an AI tool if you wanted
yeah,
to.
yeah. You want to get some
Um,
technology in there.
but yeah, I really wish I could get better at it. It's still
Yeah,
something I struggle with because I still have those things where I want to help and all of those sort of things. I'm the world's worst
yeah.
businessman. I'm very lucky, like that I do as well as I do. But yeah, I'll always try and help. And I always share in my training sessions, Chris, and thank goodness this hasn't come back to bite me. But I always say I don't do drive-by sessions. If anybody
Right.
in this room, and you're doing a whole trust event, there's 800 people there. If anybody's wants to get in touch beyond today, got any
Yeah, yeah.
questions,
Of
just
course.
here's my website. Go to the contact form. It comes to
Yeah.
me. I'll help you. All that sort of stuff. But thankfully, not everybody does that.
No, no,
Um,
no, no, no.
but I do always say that,
Yeah. Well,
because
I
it
think
goes to your
that's a
values,
really.
doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting and important takeaway for everyone who's listening. This idea that, I remember speaking to Rachel Johnson, who's the CEO of Pixel, and she said how she's had to really learn over time that you know saying no so that she protects her own well-being actually makes her better with all of the people that she works with. So it does benefit other people for you to say no, and I think there's a reflection for lots of us as leaders to think about. Not only are there times when we should say no in a nice way, but also I started thinking about whether we should probably model that to other people, but almost say no on other people's behalves to kind of protect them, because we're not always we're probably some of our own worst enemies. Well, sadly, time has flown. We are at the end, which has been a joy. And as I said, I hope this is our reconnection. But yeah, tell people a bit about how they can kind of, work with you, kind of get involved in the things you're doing.
Oh, thanks for that opportunity, Chris. Thank you. Yeah, I'm on socials. I don't use X anymore. You'll still find my ICT Evangelist account there. But if you tweet me, DM me, whatever, I'll be I don't have notifications on or anything like that.
Sure.
It's just a sort of placeholder thing. But I'm on LinkedIn. My website's ictevangelist.com. So Chris will share these things in the
links, yeah.
in the links. I do have loads and loads of free resources. If you go to the website, ictevangelist.com/blog or /free-resources, they're all in there. And you'll find things from little books of prompts to copy and paste into your LLM, like Copilot or Gemini, to do loads of different things. The teacher ones have got 15 different subjects. 15 different prompts for each subject.
Nice.
I've got a little book there that's free for SLT. I've just written an AI almanac with updated sort of keywords and terms for the use of AI. I've just co-authored, which is being released next week, so probably by the time this comes out, it'll be available, is a new digital strategy guide for schools 2026, which sort of encompasses all those sort of key stakeholders as well, from parents to students and teachers to finance to IT admins, all the rest of it. If you go to schooldigitalstrategy.com, I've co-authored that with Al Kingsley, MBE, author of Awkward Questions and his maths growth guides and sort of guidebooks for governance and all this sort of stuff. Wow. So he and I, and the editor of my playbook, Liz Berry, have produced that, and that's free. So it's 108 pages. It's a solid. It's more than a pamphlet, less than a book. But yeah, there's plenty of stuff in there. And actually, interestingly, we talked about TPAC and SAMA and stuff earlier, didn't we? There's references to that in there, and some key rubrics and change management models and all that sort of stuff.
And then I guess the one thing people are going to want to ask is there a SoundCloud account we can go to?
Well, actually, Mixcloud is where it's at.
Mixcloud is the new thing, is it?
Yeah, so if you go to mixcloud.com/DJ Mark Anderson, you can find all of my mixes and whatnot on there.
That's
so
brilliant.
yeah, go and check out my house music. There you go.
Check it out. Well, thanks ever so much, Mark. I really appreciate it, and thanks to everyone who's listening. If you want to get involved in the Leadership Launchpad stuff, then give me a shout, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.